If you have Photoshop CS5 extended, there's a new feature for working with 3D inside the program. What I'd like to do is just introduce you to this new feature. We'll go in at a later point in time in this title and look at a specific example as to how we could apply this new feature to a real piece of text. But for right now, we just want to get comfortable with the fact that this feature exists. And that feature that I'm talking about is 3D Repousse. So what we want to do is take a look at this dialog box. In order for us to do that, we're going to create some text on this document. I'm working with a document called repousse.psd, and that's available in your resources folder. So what I'd like you to do is come over and highlight the text tool. With the text tool, you can set up any font, size, color. It's completely up to you. I'm just going to go ahead and type in Train Simple, and you can do the same thing. In fact, I want this in all caps, so I'm going to go ahead and redo that. I'm just going to go ahead and type in Train Simple. You can type in, like I said, anything that you want. After typing it in, I'm going to go ahead and select the free transform tool. The keyboard shortcut for that is Command-T or Control-T on Windows. I'd like to just increase the size a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of stretch this out just a tad. Once you're happy with the transformation, go ahead and press Enter or Return on your keyboard. With the transformation complete, we're now ready to look at some of these 3D features. Again, this is only available in the extended version of Photoshop CS5. There's a 3D menu, and under the 3D menu, there's a Repousse option. Go ahead and select that, and you'll notice you can apply this 3D feature to a layer mask, a selected path, your current selection. In this case, we're working with a text layer, so we're going to go ahead and select that option. And when you do, a dialog box appears. It's just telling you that the text needs to be rasterized before you can apply these 3D transformations. So in this case, we do want to rasterize the text, so go ahead and say yes. Once you say yes, it's going to open up the Repousse dialog box. In this dialog box, again, just generally, I want to take a look at some of these options and features. You'll notice there's several different presets, and right now we have this first preset selected. What these presets do is they manipulate all the values in this dialog box. For example, if I select this option right here, it'll take a second to re-render the text, but you can now see the text looks a little bit different based upon options that have been modified here. So let's just go back and select the default option. Once we get back to the default option, we'll go ahead and take a look at some of these different features inside the dialog box. The first thing that we can do is we can change the extruded depth. The extruded depth is basically the third dimension that you're seeing applied to this text. So I'll go ahead and change that to something a little bit higher. I'll change it to 3. You can type in that text field, or you can open up this little tab here and drag the slider. I find that typing in the text field, you have a little bit more control over the values. They can quickly get out of hand in this dialog box. You can also change the scale. I'll go ahead and change this. I'm going to reduce it down a little bit. If you reduce it down, you're going to kind of tuck in the back ends of the extrusion. I'll go ahead and type in something like 0.60. And once you type that in, you can kind of see that now you basically have a wedge, a 3D wedge of this text, essentially. You can also change the angle. For example, if you want a slight twist to this, you can certainly do that with the X angle. I'll go ahead and type in a value here of something like -16. And again, you want to give it a second to process. This is a far more processor-intensive task than simply using a retouching tool in Photoshop. You can also adjust the angles using this tool up top here. If you click and drag, notice you're rotating the shape. You can also click and drag this option to kind of increase or expand the width of the text in this case. You can drag this top arrow to the left or to the right, moving the object up or down. You can also grab this guy and bring it in and out. And finally, if you want to apply a little rotation, either up or down, you can do that as well. Go ahead and rotate it down just a bit. Actually, I'll go with it up. And after doing that, if you wanted to, you could also just come in here and click and drag and kind of shape it and position it any way that you want. So you have a lot of control over here in terms of how you can manipulate the object on the screen. So once you're happy with that, you can look at some of these other options here. There's an inflate option, which basically looks like you're blowing the letters up with air. I'll go ahead and just click and drag this angle up a little bit. And again, as you drag it up, you'll notice that the letters get a little bit more puffy, and you want to give it a second to render. So 24 is going to be probably pretty extreme, but once we let that go, I'll click away from it, we'll kind of see the front of this text get a little puffier. And 20 doesn't look like it's extreme enough, so I'm just going to go ahead and drag this slider over to the right further to somewhere in the 100 range. Now you can kind of see the letters rounding out a little bit. Again, making it look like they've been inflated with air just a tad. So those are some of the options. There's also a materials option over here on the right. Right now we're taking a look at the text in white because that was the color of the text before we added this 3D feature. But we can come over to the materials and we can apply the materials to all the elements on the text. Or if we want, we can apply it just to the sides, to the bevel portion of the text. In this case, we can apply it just to the front. Go ahead and select that option. You can see all the different materials or patterns essentially that you can apply to this text. If I select this gray option, you'll notice the text gets gray. Again, not all that extreme. I'll go with something crazy like this orange peel, and now it looks like the text letters are made out of peels of oranges. Finally, the quality doesn't look the best right now because we're looking at this in a draft quality. If we want to increase the quality, you could set this to best. It'll take a second or two and kind of re-render out and make it look a lot cleaner. So I'm getting a spinning wheel here. The computer is actually processing this information, and it's going to go through and re-render this to a much higher quality setting, and now you can see a lot of those jagged lines are smoothed out. So once you're happy with this, you can go ahead and click OK. Again, a lot of those options in that dialog box may not make sense if you don't have 3D experience. Some of them do make sense if you spend the time to kind of fool around and experiment with the different options. But this is something that's new inside of Photoshop CS5 that people have been asking for quite some time, to have the ability to create 3D objects directly inside of the program, so you don't have to go out to a third-party program, a 3D editing piece of software to create 3D objects. You can now do that inside Photoshop CS5 Extended. And like I said, we'll take a look at a more detailed example a little bit later on in this course.